What kind of man would torch his own village just to starve out, confuse, and crush the morale of an invading army? That question has haunted historians for centuries. Back in the spring of 1462, Mehmed II, the mighty Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and the conqueror of Constantinople, set his sights on Wallachia. His goal was simple: break the defiance of its ruler, Vlad III, a man history would come to remember by many names: the Impaler, the ruler who burned his own land, the man who turned his country into a weapon. But when the Sultan's troops pushed forward expecting an army to meet them in open combat, what they found instead was something far worse: a scorched, ruined wasteland. Everything around them had been poisoned and destroyed by Vlad himself. As the Ottoman forces made their way along the Danube toward Wallachia, they marched straight into a dead land, stripped bare of life. Reports from that time, including a letter from the Byzantine chronicler Leonikos H. Condesales, describe how Vlad ordered the systematic destruction of everything that could sustain an army: fields, wells, and whole villages. Houses were burned to the ground, towns were emptied or leveled, and livestock was slaughtered or driven away. It wasn't random cruelty. It was cold, calculated strategy. Vlad knew he was outnumbered. His forces couldn't stand a chance in a head-on clash against Mehmed's massive army, some 90,000 strong. So instead of waiting to be crushed, he decided to fight differently. He turned Wallachia itself into a weapon of war. Villages along the Ottoman path were evacuated, and those who couldn't flee were often killed. That left the enemy with nothing: no food, no shelter, no guides. In one of his own letters, written to Matthias Corvinus of Hungary that same year, Vlad described his brutal tactics without a hint of regret. "I killed the peasants, men and women, young and old. We burned everything." That letter, still preserved in the Hungarian National Archives, stands as one of the few surviving documents where Vlad himself admits to his scorched earth campaign. And the harsh truth is, it worked. The Ottoman soldiers, unfamiliar with the land and weakened by disease and hunger, suddenly found themselves stranded deep in hostile territory. Their morale collapsed. Fear spread through the ranks. Men began to abandon their positions, not because of battle losses, but because they were being consumed by exhaustion, starvation, and despair. This wasn't war as the Ottomans knew it. It was destruction without confrontation, a slow, grinding annihilation. And as grim as that was, it was only the beginning. When Mehmed's army finally approached the strongholds deep within Wallachia, they stumbled upon something even more horrifying. Something meant to freeze their blood before they ever lifted a sword. Outside the fortress gates, thousands of corpses had been raised high on wooden stakes. Heads, bodies, even the bodies of horses, all displayed like gruesome trophies. This was psychological warfare at its most merciless. Historical letters from the Venetian ambassador to Buda, as well as Ottoman chroniclers like Tursun Bey, confirmed that the display wasn't random. It was deliberate, a message written in blood and fear. The message was simple: turn back. When the Ottomans reached the citadel of Targovist, they found what looked like a forest of impaled figures. It wasn't just horror, it was theater. The victims weren't only captured soldiers but scouts, envoys, even noblemen. Their executions were staged with precision, each one designed to paralyze the enemy with dread before a single arrow flew. Some of the impaled figures, people say, were actually high-ranking Ottoman envoys, messengers Mehmed had sent ahead before the invasion even began. According to a 16th-century Saxon chronicle from Brasov, Vlad punished them after they refused to remove their turbans in his presence, claiming it was against their faith. Vlad's reply, as the story goes, was as cruel as it was mocking. "Then let them keep their turbans on, fastened to their heads." He ordered them executed in their own custom, and afterward, they were impaled, turbans and all. Now, the exact words can't be proven. It's been centuries. But the story shows up in both Saxon and Slavic records, which makes it hard to ignore. What's clear is that Vlad had zero tolerance for what he saw as defiance. Behind the fortress gates, the roads leading to larger towns like Bucharest and Targovist were lined with even more stakes, some fresh, some weathered with age, each one bearing grim reminders of his wrath. Ottoman soldiers, hardened men who'd fought in countless battles, were said to have turned back in sheer terror. Even their own chroniclers admitted that Mem's warriors, seasoned veterans of conquest, were shaken by what they saw. It wasn't just horror. It was a message carved into the land itself. For Vlad III of Wallachia, known in old records as Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler, impalement wasn't merely a punishment. It was his language of power. It was the tool he used to rule, to frighten enemies, to keep his own people in line, and to remind everyone who truly held control in that contested corner of Europe. Of course, Vlad didn't invent the practice. Impalement had existed in one form or another all across the medieval world, even within the Ottoman Empire itself. But Vlad took it further. He turned it into an art form of intimidation, public, theatrical, and unforgettable. Writers from all sides, Ottoman, Saxon, and Slavic, recorded how Vlad used this method on a scale no one had seen before, especially during his reign between 1456 and 1462. The process itself was horrifying. A long wooden stake was forced through the victim's body, usually starting low and pushed upward, sometimes emerging from the chest, sometimes the mouth or shoulders. The stake was carefully shaped to prolong the agony, and victims could survive for hours, sometimes days, before finally dying. Vlad's men arranged these executions like they were setting a stage. Rows of impaled bodies positioned with eerie precision, each stake at a different height. Foreign witnesses described the site as a forest of the dead. The most infamous of these scenes took place in 1462, when Mem's army was marching toward Targovist. According to chroniclers like Antonio Bonfini and Leonikos Hawkendales, Vlad ordered about 20,000 prisoners to be impaled. Mostly captured Ottomans, but also a few Wallachians accused of betrayal. The stakes were set outside the city in perfect, deliberate symmetry, creating a grotesque display that could be seen for miles. It wasn't random slaughter. It was a calculated performance meant to stop Mehmed in his tracks. And it worked. Ottoman records confirm the impact. Tursun Bey, a historian who accompanied Mehmed on his campaign, wrote that the Sultan himself halted to look upon the field of impaled bodies, and for the first time he seemed truly shaken. Mehmed, who had conquered vast lands and crushed countless foes, reportedly muttered that it was impossible to defeat a man who ruled with such merciless resolve toward his enemies and his own people. But Vlad's use of impalement didn't stop when the fighting paused. Even in times of uneasy peace, he kept that same ruthless discipline alive across Wallachia. For him, the stake wasn't just a tool of war, it was a symbol of order. He used it to punish thieves, liars, and traitors. Sometimes, even small acts of disobedience were enough to earn a slow death if he believed they threatened the structure of his rule. One Saxon chronicler, Michael Bischheim, recorded a story that still makes me shake my head. He wrote about a woman who lied about her husband's work to avoid her own duties. Vlad saw that lie not as a trivial offense, but as an insult to the dignity and honesty of his people. Her punishment, impalement. To his enemies, such acts were sheer terror. To Vlad, they were justice, his own twisted kind of justice. During his relentless campaign in 1462, Vlad took cruelty to a new level. The burned fields, the forests of impaled bodies, they were only part of his message to Sultan Mehmed II. He also used living men as weapons. Certain captured Ottoman soldiers were not executed outright. Instead, they were mutilated and released, turned into walking warnings for the Sultan himself. According to both Slavic sources and a text known as the Sermon on Drakul, these prisoners were brutally disfigured before being set free. Their eyes were gouged out, their noses and ears cut off, and many were left with deep scars or missing limbs. Some were even branded with heated iron, their skin carved with symbols meant to humiliate and terrify. These weren't random outbursts of violence. They were carefully calculated acts of psychological warfare. Every maimed prisoner who stumbled back to Ottoman lines carried a message that words could never deliver. That Vlad Tepes feared nothing. Not vengeance, not God, not the empire itself. Some historians think these punishments also carried a layer of religious insult, designed to provoke and humiliate Muslim captives, but not all sources agree on that. What's certain is that Vlad used terror as a language, and he spoke it fluently. His cruelty had purpose. His brutality was his policy. Those who survived his punishments weren't spared out of mercy. they were spared to spread fear. Their ruined bodies told stories louder than any messenger could shout. For Mem II, the conqueror of Constantinople, a man who thought he'd seen every kind of savagery, Vlad's actions were more than barbaric. They were personal, a direct challenge to his pride as both a ruler and a warrior. Vlad's message was simple: "I'm not afraid of you." The maimed prisoners who limped back to their camps weren't accidents of war. They were proclamations. Proof that Vlad's resolve burned hotter than his fields. His cold precision and calculated cruelty echoed across the Balkans long after 1462, forcing even the great Mem II to hesitate before pressing deeper into Wallachia. His scorched lands, the forests of stakes, and those broken survivors still stand in history as grim reminders of how power, when wielded without mercy, can twist cruelty into strategy and fear into a weapon. And it leaves one haunting question behind. Which of Vlad's tactics do you think broke the Ottoman spirit the most? The burning villages, the impaled corpses, or the mutilated survivors who lived to tell the tale?